to Got Your Back Chat, a podcast where we talk about whatever we want as young people. Today, we're joined by Tosh and me, Ruby. How are you today, Tosh?
I'm good, thank you, Ruby. How are you?
I'm good also. Today, we are talking about looking out for yourself and others when it comes to sexual harassment and sexism. We've covered this theme throughout November, so make sure you subscribe and follow us on socials at GYB Hull or search Got Your Back Hull on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Spotify. So obviously we want to talk about this because of the recent stuff in the news about, spiking drinks, and there's just like a sort of epidemic of sexual assault in the media lately. So Tosh, what are your thoughts at the moment on everything happening?
Well, obviously, I think it's despicable, and as a man, I feel a little bit ashamed about it. To be honest, it's a bit disgusting to see all these people, these women, being hurt, and obviously some of them are dying and being killed at the hands of men.
Obviously, it's a very big thing in the media right now, but it has sort of always been a thing. So what do you think sexual harassment is? Because obviously a lot of people say it's difficult to draw the line. Where do you think the line is drawn?
I think sexual harassment is such a spectrum. Like it can be a plethora of things. There's anything to catcalling, which is to deep sexual harassment like rape and assault. I guess it's just anything that can affect other people in a sexual way, all of them having similar effects. And
yeah, and I think it definitely is a spectrum, and I know a lot of people go without knowing they've been sexually harassed, and then they sort of find out, later in life, like, oh, that thing happened to me and it was sexual harassment. And I think a lot of things are sort of normalised, stuff like catcalling.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people wouldn't even class that as sexual harassment. They just think, oh, it's just like, that's normal, and it is actually sexual harassment, and it's not good.
There's people don't realise as well, like the male gaze and things like that can be classed as sexual harassment. It doesn't even need to be verbal. Anything that you feel uncomfortable with in a sexual way can be sexual harassment.
Yeah, I think especially a lot of the time, you sort of get looks from men, just, men staring at you. That is sexual harassment, and I think that's never talked about as sexual harassment, but it is, and it makes, women feel uncomfortable. So Tosh, as a boy, what would you do if you saw someone being harassed?
Well, I'd like to think, of course, that I would at least attempt to step in or distract the person who is harassing them. But it can be difficult when I'm a young person. But I think at the very least, I would at least get someone to do something else about it, like an enforcing person, like a police officer or someone older than me, to sort it out. Because it can't happen. Like it's not okay.
Yeah, and I think it is definitely difficult to know, like, what to do in a sort of situation, especially if you see a group of men, or if it's sort of if it's an adult man, you don't want to put yourself at risk, but also it's not good to see someone else being harassed. And I think a lot of people do struggle with knowing what to do in that sort of situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So are you sort of in friendships? I think people tend to be more likely. Well, I don't know. I think it would be easier to call someone out, because obviously it doesn't just happen. It's not just strangers walking down the street that sexually harass people, in friendships, in friend groups. You get, friends that make comments that are a bit out of line. What would you sort of do in a situation like that?
If they're of similar age to me, I don't think I would be as scared to call them out. But it's difficult when they're your friend, because you'd like to think that they wouldn't do that, or they'd know not to do that. So you've put it away and you don't think about it. And as well, you don't really want to lose friends. But I know that I personally would call my friends out if anything like that happened.
Yeah, and
I just don't think that's okay.
I think especially in friend groups, you can sort of feel a bit silly calling out a friend. I've had friends in the past that haven't been very nice people, and they've sort of maybe made comments about women and stuff. And often if you say, that's not okay to say, you'll get this response of multiple people saying, oh, we're just joking, oh, you're just like not being, you're not, it's just a joke, take it as a joke. And you can sort of be made to feel silly, and you're definitely not in the wrong if you call someone out on inappropriate behaviour. So would you sort of, if it happened to you, would you call it out?
If one of my friends did it.
Yeah, or just in general, because obviously this is about women, what with White Ribbon Day tomorrow and stuff, but if it happened to you or someone do you think they should sort of call it out?
If I was sexually harassed, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh. I've never really thought about that, to be honest. I've always seen myself as sort of immune to sexual harassment, so it's difficult for me to imagine that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, I don't know, it is sort of a tricky one. I think I would be more likely to... I don't know, actually I don't think I would be any more likely to do it if it was someone I knew, someone in a friend group. I think I'm almost more likely to do it if it's a stranger, because I can just say to them, that's out of line, and then never speak to them again and just move on. And maybe they'll take that and think about it and think maybe it is out of line. But I think it can be harder to call someone out when they're in your friendship group, because you're afraid of making it awkward or something.
I think it's so important to call it out and let people know that they can't just say that as well. Even if it is difficult, you just have to let them know that you can't say stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely one way we can sort of reduce it. I think that would really help if, everyone said to a friend, that maybe steps out of line, that's not okay. If everyone did that wanted to do it, then, maybe it would make a real change. It's all those, little things that could lead to a very big change. Tosh, so if you could send a message out to the opposite gender regarding this topic, what would it be?
I would try and exclaim the message that always report sexual harassment if you're uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, and I think especially just telling women it's not your fault, because I know obviously it is a very big thing, victim blaming, or being made to feel silly, being made to think oh, I'm just that's not actual sexual assault, I'm just being ridiculous. A lot of women deal with those sort of emotions. I know a lot of things where I wouldn't have thought of it as sexual assault until you look back years later and you think hang on, that wasn't, that was out of order. And I think it's just very important to know it's never your fault. You're never in the wrong for reporting something, even if you're maybe not sure if it classes as sexual assault or not. Never think that you're in the wrong for thinking it might, because if that's genuinely how you feel, then it's always worth maybe doing some research, looking up about it. But it's very important to know that you're not in the wrong for, you know, wanting justice or like knowing, you know, you've been sexually assaulted.
And there's so much stuff where men blame women for example, the clothes that they wear, and it's just so important that people know it isn't them at all, and wearing revealing clothing or something like that does not mean that it's okay to be sexually harassed, or it doesn't mean that you're asking for it. Absolutely not.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, as a girl, like, I don't really feel safe going out at the moment, and that's like not something that should be acceptable, you know. Like, most women I know wouldn't feel safe going out, you know, like at night or even in the daytime on their own, like going for a run, or like going, maybe if you're going out to a party, going in like revealing clothing. A lot of women don't feel safe walking on their own, like rightfully so, and I think that's just not good, and we as a society need to do something to change it. So what age do you think sex education should sort of start to warn young people about sexual assault?
Well, honestly, before you want to educate young people before it starts to happen, and it could start to happen so young. So I would say in primary school, if that's possible, because as soon as people start to be the victims of it, if we nip it in the bud at a young age, then it will decrease. And I think that would be so important to educate children on the realities of sexual assault, obviously in a way that's acceptable to teach them, but we can really make a difference with a new generation.
Yeah, and I think it is that sort of thing of, you can't report it if you don't know you've been sexually assaulted, and you can't stop yourself from, you know, like doing it if you don't know it's sexual assault. And a lot of people who aren't taught about it at a very young age find themselves that, you know, there's a lot of misinformation around sexual assault, and a lot of boys are never taught, you know, that like that isn't okay to do, so then they go and do it. And I think if they were taught that from a young age, I think a lot of men wouldn't do stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Especially, you know, looking at like this generation now and then the previous generations. I mean, I think our generation isn't much better. You still definitely get sort of catcallers and sexual assaulters, but we have been taught more than the older generations from a younger age, and I think it definitely does seem to make a big difference. And I think if we just keep on doing that, you know, teaching people, sort of, then we could make a very big change.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it from us this month. Thank you for listening, and make sure to follow us on our socials at GYB Hull. Remember, all of our episodes are on YouTube and Spotify. Bye.
Got Your Back Chat is a podcast made by Got Your Back, a media made by young people for young people. Got Your Back Chat is managed by Eskimosoup for the Got Your Back campaign. Alice O'Dwyer is our campaign lead, Jenny Harrison is our producer, Keely Graham is our designer, and Peyton Hutchinson made the jingle. You can follow Got Your Back on social media by searching @GYB Hull, and make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to hear more in the future.